Thank you, Chair Mandelman. I want to start this hearing by telling you the genesis of why I called for this hearing. Last year, I was on Chestnut Street in my district with my son, who at the time was 13 years old, and we saw an individual in distress. He was walking down the street with no pants and looking through garbage cans for food and acting in a way that made me think that this person was in need of our help. And so what I did is I called the non-emergency police number, and I waited, and they came out, and they made contact with this individual who complied, and as the police were deciding what to do, they came up to me and they said, well, you know, you called it in, do you want to make a citizen's arrest for indecent exposure or something like that? And I said, absolutely not. This person does not need to go to jail. That's exactly what we don't need to happen. And so after a series of questions, the police, I believe, determined that this person was a danger to himself. I don't know if to others at this point, but they ended up taking him to the hospital, to SF General, on a 5150 hold. At that point, of course, I don't know what happened because of HIPAA laws, and you lose track of what's going on at that point. But the next day, I saw this individual on Chestnut Street with his hospital bracelet on, almost in the same condition. And for me, what that said is that I think at that point when this person was taken to the hospital in need of help, that somehow when he was released, we missed an opportunity. That we, in part, I think, failed this person not getting him the help that he needed. To see him back out on the streets one day later in the same condition for me was heartbreaking. And I want to do better. I want us as a city to do better. And I see this individual time to time in my district, and I don't know how to help him, and I want to learn how to help him. We talk a lot about coordinated entry in the city and county of San Francisco, but we don't really talk a lot about coordinated exit. And when I'm talking about coordinated exit, I mean, what are we doing at the hospitals? We know that the homelessness crisis on our streets is not new information. We know for decades, thousands of people have lived without homes or shelter. And while in San Francisco, our biennial counts indicate that the number of people living on our streets has been relatively stable, I believe certain aspects of those that are unhoused have worsened in recent times. Often our neediest residents, some with pre-existing substance abuse and mental health issues, end up homeless, as we know. And then months or even years of living on the streets only exacerbates these conditions and makes it worse for the individual. We know nationally that America has been hit with an opiate epidemic. Over 70,000 people have died nationally in 2017, and our city has not been immune to this. I think the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors that pushed OxyContin on this country should be in jail. Worse yet, San Francisco has actually been even more affected by the increased use of methamphetamine. I believe as a society we need to do everything we can to destigmatize mental health and substance abuse issues. Treating these conditions is incredibly challenging and requires an ongoing effort, but we must lead with services and treatment. All of these problems underlie the heartbreaking crisis we are witnessing on our streets. Thousands of people, many with physical, mental, and substance abuse-related health conditions, who are struggling to survive, are unhoused and in need of our help. Our homelessness crisis is not just about homelessness. It is about mental health and substance abuse as well. And I know this personally. I have a brother who is a heroin addict and has been homeless in my hometown of Merced. And I see how hard it is to help him. I see how hard it is for my parents to help him. We try everything we can to help my brother. but he wants to use, and it's incredibly challenging. And I understand those challenges for families, and I understand those challenges for people who want to provide services to help individuals who are suffering. We know this crisis will not be solved overnight. We know it will take years of building new shelters and supportive housing, improving upon our services, and holding providers accountable. So I have 3 goals for today. First, I would like to understand the processes in which multiple departments coordinate and provide services to homeless individuals with mental health and substance abuse issues, with a focus on the 5150 process. And why I say the 5150 process is because when I toured SF General and I talked to the psychiatrist there, I learned that 68% of PES admissions are homeless. Second, I want to identify key points where departments interact or do not interact and could, such as when a person enters and exits psychiatric emergency services. Again, a coordinated exit. Third, I want to identify opportunities to improve the current coordination and services. Are there ways we can leverage existing resources to provide more or better resources? Are there points where we are losing people, where better coordination would get them in services rather than return to the streets? And I also want to understand what services could we be providing when people are leaving the hospital on a psychiatric hold? What are we lacking? Where do we need to invest? Is it more mental health beds? Is it step-down beds? Is it treatment on demand? What is it? Because I want to figure that out, and I know we all do, and I want to figure out how to provide that. I also want to be clear in this hearing. This hearing is not focused on SB 1045 and conservatorship. This hearing is about what happens when people living on our streets with substance abuse and mental health issues enter the hospital, whether on a 5150 hold or for any other reason, and how we can better help them. I want this conversation to be about preventing us to ever getting to conservatorship, because the longer people are out there on the streets suffering from substance abuse and addiction and mental health issues, the more likely is they might have to even consider conservatorship, and we don't want that to happen. We want people to live free and healthy lives and to be housed. We have to figure out how better to coordinate services to make sure that happens. I think everyone can agree, and we know SB 1045 talks about 8 5150s as a baseline to consider, and I think everyone can agree that 8 5150s is far too many for any individual, and we need to do everything in our power to help people the first time they need it. The hospital cannot be a revolving door that leads back to our streets. When we have an opportunity to help people, I believe we need to do everything we can to succeed at that point. We need more shelter, and we need more effective services. We need every city department and nonprofit involved to be accountable and raise the bar in what we do. No city across this country has figured this out, and we are all facing similar problems. But I think what we can do is to continue to fight for change and continue to demand that we do better. I hope today can be a step in that change, and I want to thank all the representatives of the departments here and for my fellow committee members for being part of this work. I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak at this time, but I do have Roland Pickens, the CEO of San Francisco Health Network, that's going to lead our presentation.
Go for it.